Good afternoon and welcome this afternoon to ThinkScript Studies on thinkorswim, another great webcast from Schwab Coaching. My name is Ben Watson. I'm an education coach and senior manager here at Charles Schwab. I am joined out there in the chat by my good friend Brent Moores. And Brent's a phenomenal educator in his own right. He's there to help back me up, but he's also there to help answer your questions along the way. And thank you for your patience. We looked like we were going to have a little bit of a delayed start, but I'm glad we are here and ready to go. Thank you for all being here, whether you're here in the live version or the recorded version. Doesn't matter. We appreciate you being here anyway. And we're glad that you are our clients and you have an interest in ThinkScripting. A couple of things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the idea of turning a script that you might apply to a chart into a scan. So we'll look at some of the techniques that you can use to do that. And then I want to touch a little bit on some of the reasons why we might make a study into a strategy. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how you might use that strategy application in this discussion. So I'm going to jump in and we'll take a look at a couple of quick housekeeping items that we need to pay attention to. Remember that everything we talk about simply for illustrative and educational purposes only. It is not a recommendation or any kind of advice or endorsement of a particular security pattern, strategy, script, study, or anything else. We may talk about options today. Just to make sure that if we do talk about options, remember that options carry a high level of risk. They're not suitable for all investors. Make sure that you're aware of the characteristics and risks of standardized options before considering any options strategy. Also, we're going to be using technical analysis as part of this discussion. Remember that Schwab doesn't recommend the use of technical analysis as the sole means of investment research. We're going to be using the thinkorswim desktop software platform today, specifically the paperMoney version of that. Remember that there are some things that the paperMoney version doesn't do that the live trading platform does. And one of those is it does not allow, the paperMoney platform does not allow for the use of studies in scans. So make sure that you're aware of that. We're going to be using the paperMoney platform, but I'm going to be using my demonstration version of the account. So it is built to look like a live account. It behaves like a live account, but I assure you it is not a live account. However, if you find that you're running into challenges in applying the things that we learned today and talk about, remember that studies in scans don't work in the paperMoney platform, only in the live account. That may alleviate some of that frustration. Now, when we talk about back testing, as we get into strategies, remember that back testing results are hypothetical, no guarantee that the strategy will, when implemented, return the same results. Remember that investing involves risk, including the loss of principal, and past performance of any security strategy doesn't guarantee future results or success. So here's kind of the mantra and thought process behind ThinkScripting. And ThinkScript is the programming language that is built into the thinkorswim platform for those of you that are brand new, and welcome to you, certainly. One of the thought processes in this approach is to look and see what you want to try to do, right? Identify the goal. Think about how ThinkScripting can meet the goal, or maybe there's already a solution in ThinkScript. Outline the steps, apply the tools, write the scripts if needed, test, reiterate, and then go ahead and share that script link. So that's what we're going to try to do a little bit of today. Now, admittedly, and I'm going to say this right off the bat, and some of you have been in ThinkScript discussions and webcasts where I have been the presenter before. I'm not Ken Rose, I'm not Michael Fairborn, I'm not the strongest when it comes to coding and programming, but what I can do is I can look at a script and help to understand some of the mechanisms that are at work within that script. And that's why I wanted to kind of approach this from the perspective today that I'm approaching it from, is that how can we use some of the things that we're already familiar with, maybe we're already using, and turn those into a tool in which we can apply that characteristic to, say, for instance, a scan. So on Tuesday mornings, I teach a webcast focused on trading flag patterns. And in that webcast, we've done a number of things to try to focus on applying some of the tools. In fact, we've built in that webcast, we've built some specific studies and characteristics and patterns that have been helpful in trying to identify those characteristics. I'm going to go back over here to the chart tab. I'm actually going to bring up one of those pattern tools that we've built specifically for the purpose of identifying flag patterns. Now, think about this. This might be applicable to any type of strategy or type of technical pattern or circumstance that you might be looking for. The first step is identifying what it is that you want to accomplish, right? So in looking for like a bull flag type of trade, for instance, as an example, and by the way, you can jump into the playlist for that bull flag or flag trading class, that webcast, which is on Tuesday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And I'll let Brent see if Brent can go out and grab the link to that playlist so that you've got it. But one of the things that a trader might do in this process of identifying how thinkScript can help is first outline the process or the circumstance that the trader wants thinkScript to help identify, right? So we think about a bull flag type of pattern, and a bull flag type of pattern is generally something like this, right? Rally up, strong impulse move to the upside, and then a little bit of a pullback, and then the expectation would be a continuation of that trending move. There's an example here on PayPal of a potential bull flag, and I thought we'd use this perhaps as kind of our starting point example, simply because it's a well-defined, from a characteristic pattern, a well-defined approach to a bull flag, right? We can see that strong impulse move to the upside. We can see the little bit of a pullback. Let me kill that annotation so that you can see what's going on here. But that fairly consistent, fairly, almost picture perfect, nothing is ever picture perfect, right? But pretty characteristic rally up, a couple of 3-day pullback, and then we start to see that little bit of a bounce, perhaps off of a level of support. Now, there are ways that we can go about identifying this, right? Visually, we can train ourselves to see that type of pattern. And what we're doing is we're coding our brains, we're writing into that thinkScript of our brains what it is that we want to see. We want to see that rally up and that little bit of a pullback, and then the continuation or the circumstances that would give us the opportunity to take advantage of that continuation. But to codify this, one of the steps that I took was to put this into kind of a candlestick perspective. And so what we did a few weeks ago in this particular class is we went to the patterns tool up here in the top right, and we created a custom candlestick pattern. And that custom candlestick pattern we used as a means to find flag patterns, right? So we created a bull flag type of pattern perspective. In fact, we even found a way to kind of codify kind of that idea of a close above the high of the low day, or a hold. And so we created that. In fact, this one here, the emerging bull flag candle, was the script that we created using this creation tool that gave us the ability to build using the condition wizard thinkScript that helped us to understand that particular pattern. And the pattern that we built in this particular case was an emerging bull flag pattern, not a flag that had already occurred, but an emerging bull flag candle. So we took that and we created that. And so if we were to look at this in the context of this tool, right, we were looking for a move of about 10 candles to the upside, and then a descending trend of at least 3 candles, followed by an up candle, and a candle that was coded green, right, that was colored green. And so that thought process, right, of writing out that script, that kind of, what do I want this to look like? What do I want it to accomplish for me? What do I want this pattern to do? Is the first step in think scripting. Whether it's building a study or whether it's building a pattern, it's kind of identifying what it is that we want to occur. And so in this particular case, what we want to see happening is, say, for instance, 10 candles high, an impulse move to the upside, 3 candle pullback. And it doesn't have to necessarily be 3 consecutive candles. We just want to see a descending trend. If we were to say 3 down candles, right? We were to say 1, 2, 3 and do that count of 3 down candles or mixed candles, we could do that. And we could simply say, okay, I want to see 5 candles or 10 candles or whatever, 3 candles, of which at least 2 are down candles. We can be more specific and more granular in that focus. But in this particular case, I just want to see a descending trend. And that descending trend in this particular case, simply giving us that little bit of a pullback, and then an up candle that gives us a move to the upside, and then we click on save. But before we do that, one of the things that we can do is we can click right here on where it says script editor or thinkScript editor. And so what that does is it now gives us kind of a code snippet, right? It gives us a code snippet for this particular perspective, right? And the idea is that this snippet of code, which we've now named emerging bull flag candle, could be used elsewhere. We could take this snippet of code and we could plug it in someplace else, right? We could build this into another study that maybe had other characteristics, or a scan that had other characteristics, meaning, right, that maybe we had another study that was part of a complex study, right? We included also some sort of momentum indicator or volume indicator or whatever we wanted to include in this particular script code. But what this has given us is that ability to just kind of right click or left click and drag and then copy that code snippet and plug that into someplace else, right? But the usefulness of this maybe becomes appropriate not only if we were to just click cancel and kind of come back to where we are, but click on apply and OK, and now apply this to our chart. And one of the things that we're happening to see here is that the indicator that we're getting is not necessarily what we want it to see, right? We can see where those characteristics are, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we see that downward trend of 3 candles here. And so if I zoom in, you can see that there's a little dot right there that indicates on this particular candle at the moment, a yes condition, meaning that this emerging bull flag candle characteristic, the pattern that we built, is in fact true, right? That's now a true characteristic. And so it's showing us that little dot indicating that that is true. Now, one of the first steps in kind of adapting this into being something that's maybe a little bit more useful than just this pattern identification is if we go back to the select patterns and we go back to this emerging bull flag candle and we click on the gear icon. Now, this isn't specific necessarily to thinkScript, but this is a way that we can start to adapt that thinkScript to making it a little bit more useful. And it's also useful in any area where we have some sort of scripting that gives us a condition, like these multiple types of conditions that exist, right? These different types of candlestick patterns, for instance, or Fibonacci patterns, or whatever it might be. Anytime we have that little script scroll on the left-hand side, we can generally come in and we can do some customization. So the first thing I want to do is see what kind of customization that we have when we click on the gear icon first and foremost. All right, so if I click on the gear icon, what I happen to notice is I do have the ability to customize this pattern plot. That pattern plot is what's showing up on the screen as that true false flag, right? Whether there's a bull flag that exists or it doesn't exist, right? That characteristic, right? That in this case, emerging bull flag. Now, I can change this within the context of this customization gear, right? Remember, on the thinkorswim platform, anytime we see that customization gear, there is the ability to change something, right? Whether it's customizing a column header, whether it's customizing the study. And in this particular case, yep, and I will share these. Absolutely, Isaiah. Great question. And yes, I will do that. So anytime we see that gear icon, I can come back over here, I can customize, right? So in this particular case, I can choose the painting strategy, right? So this is a point at the close, right? And if I wanted to change it to something else, I could change it to like an up arrow or an up triangle at a particular point, right? And I've got some choices here within that characteristic. So I could change this now to it. Mighty Mouse, you can't find that because it's a custom study. It's a custom pattern that I built. So I'm going to share that with you here in just a second. But if I click on this up arrow at the low and change that, and say, for instance, change the width of that so that we can see it maybe a little bit larger. Now I click on OK and apply and OK. And now that becomes more useful in terms of, oh, thank you. Okay, Wiley, I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. But now that becomes that little true false flag, or at least yes, no flag in this particular case, becomes a little bit more useful, because now if I zoom out, now I can see where those emerging bull flags exist, right? Where that characteristic exists. Now, granted, look, not every single one of these, results in a continuation flag, right? In the flag kind of resulting in upward movement. And that's just the nature of flag patterns and candlesticks in general. They don't always, even if we have the circumstance, they don't always play themselves out, right? And that would be true with any kind of pattern symbol or pattern signal that we might be looking for. But notice now that I've changed that, if I go back to the, if I go back to the patterns and I go to select patterns and I go back to this emerging flag candle, if I go to the script and I go to the thinkScript editor, okay, so now what hasn't changed is the way that this by default plots that particular characteristic on the chart, right? So it gives me that choice, but it doesn't backwards adapt the script itself based on the choice that I make here in that characteristic. But it gives me the ability to select a variety of different choices within this characteristic. I happen to find that up arrow at the low and making that a little bit larger becomes helpful, right? So that's something that you would do either in the customization arrow, or you could come back over here and we could edit the thinkScript, and we can make that thinkScript, instead of points, we could edit that thinkScript painting strategy to match what we wanted the default to be, whether it was an arrow, whether it was a point, or whatever we wanted it to be, right? And so we could change that if we needed to. And so that becomes kind of that function of how do we paint that information on the chart, right? So how do we create that information here? And so again, that's something that I'm playing around with and learning more about using, is that ability, right? To come back and change the thinkScript. But the thing about it is, the important part of this, not necessarily being how you show that on the chart, but what condition it is that you come up with, right? So Isaiah asks a great question. Well, what are some of the more common candle styles that we see, right? So let's go back here, let's cancel that, and let's take that one off, and let's just kind of see how this might work. We're going to go to the candlestick patterns that exist here, and one that's probably more common than anything else, and maybe a way that we can kind of expand this or take this from that direction, is the hammer, which is a bullish trend reversal candlestick generally where we get a downtrend, and then we get a hammer candle, which is a long shadow below and a narrow body above, right? And generally turns into a bullish candle. The idea is that if this occurs at a level of support, oftentimes that can be an indication of a potential bullish reversal. But here's what's kind of cool about this, is that we can take that hammer and we can come over here and we can click on the little script scroll to the left of the hammer candle definition in the displayed patterns, and we can come back over here and we can see what the script looks like for that particular condition, right? So we can see what that script looks like in that characteristic. What we can't do, unfortunately, in this particular case, unless we do something a little bit different, is we can't really go back and do kind of that condition wizard creation, but we can get a sense of what this is looking for in terms of that input. And we can fine tune this script a little bit to see what those characteristics are. So this hammer candle has a length input. It has a trend setup input. So length of the candle, trend coming into it, body factor, how large the body is, how large the shadow is, right? And so as we start to look at how we might put this together, then what we could do is we could take this ThinkScript, right? And we could right click and copy. And then the cool thing about ThinkScripting is if we cancel that and we cancel this, we can go back over to Tools and we can go to ThinkScript and we can say, all right, let's create a new one. Let's click on the little plus icon. So I'm on the Tools tab. I'm on the ThinkScript sub tab. And I'm going to go right here to that little plus sign. And I'm going to build a study. And we're going to call this hammer study. We'll call that hammer study. We'll click on create. And now what we're going to do is we're just going to paste. We're going to do a Control V and put our information here, Control V, put that script into our ThinkScript entry box here, right? And now we're just going to click on save. Okay. Now, the cool thing about doing that in taking it from the pattern tool, because remember we found this over here on patterns and we went select patterns. And let me take that emerging bull flag off of there. Now, what we can do by making that shift right there, and again, Isaiah, this is an answer to your specific question. What are some of the more common candle styles? But I'm using this as a launch pad for this kind of next step of taking that code and making it into a study that we can use. Now I can go to my flask icon here, and I should have that hammer, H-A-M-M, hammer study that we just created by copying and pasting that code snippet over here into our study group. And now we can click on Add Selected. And now the cool thing is we don't necessarily have to go in and change the script, because now we have the characteristics that we can change based on the input, right? Because that's the way the script is written. So now we can come in and say, all right, what's the length that we want to see? What's the trend setup? So it's a 3-day down or 3-bar downtrend. How large is the body? What do we want to see there? And then we can again make those changes to the characteristics of what we want it to point out, right? So up arrow at the low, how wide do we want it to be? What color do we want it to be? I kind of like that obnoxious fuchsia color just because it's easier for me to see. Click on OK, click on Apply and OK. And now we see the study pointing out an occurrence of those particular characteristics, right? So now that brings up another question, right? Well, wait a second. If I don't like the fact that I only get one hammer candle right here. And if I zoom in and I see, hey, that's a hammer candle, at least according to the script, well, now what can I do, right? Now what do I need to do? Because I also see, as I look at this visually, I see 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 hammer-like candles that exist on this chart. Here's one right there that might be hammer-like and the potential for that move to the upside. So now what we need to do is we now need to kind of fine-tune or tweak that strategy. In Ocean Life, I see your question there. That's going to be next, is how we take these strategy indicators and kind of apply these tools to them, right? How do we make this study into a strategy? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to this flask icon, and we're going to fine-tune this study a little bit. So this isn't necessarily ThinkScript, but this is ThinkScript adjacent, because what we're doing is we're kind of working to reverse engineer what we want the ThinkScript to tell us, right? What we want the ThinkScript to show. So we're going to come back in here. We're going to say, all right, how long do I want that body of the candle to be? What kind of length of trend coming down do we want it to have? What kind of body factor and shadow factor? And if we're confused about what those inputs are, we can just simply go back once again to our ThinkScript by left-clicking on that scroll, and we can see what those inputs are. And in this particular case, input is the length of the body of the candle, right? The shadow factor must not be negative. And so what I think we're having here is an issue with the length of that lower shadow, number one, and number two, the length of the trend coming into it, because we need to have, in this particular case, as the script is written, a downtrend or a downtrending characteristic of 3 downward candles. The other thing that I happen to notice in looking at this is the script itself actually also includes a little bit of fuzzy factor to it. And then that's the margin of error for these. We could increase the margin of error, but what we would get is, if we increase that margin of error in the script, we're likely to get more false signals. But right now, we might be a little bit too tight. So I'm actually going to bump that margin of error up by about 5/10, right, of that. And we're going to click on Apply and OK, and click on Apply and OK. And we're still not fuzzy enough, perhaps, right? Now we can come back. We can adjust that again. We see there's our fuzziness. What we might want to do also is adjust the script to show maybe a 2 candle downtrend. Click on Apply and OK. And we're not getting any additional results. So that's going to take some additional tweaking to this process. And we can iterate that out here by looking at what we want to see in terms of those characteristics. Click on Apply, OK, and Apply. And it may very well be that the characteristic that we're looking for just doesn't currently exist. Although I can see a couple of these candles here that might qualify. We just need to figure out where that limitation is, right? There's a similar process. If we go over here to the Patterns tool and we click on Select Patterns, and we go to one of those candlesticks, and we go, say, for instance, the hammer candle, and we bring that hammer candle in here, and we click on the gear icon, we could do the same type of thing, but we could also kind of fine-tune that pattern. We can fine-tune patterns. We could even put that hammer candle type in here. Here's that flag pattern. The cool thing is we get that ability to kind of fine-tune the sensitivity. So this is a good training ground for how we could iterate that script, right? So now we've got our hammer candle. We've got our hammer study here. Now let's see if we can take that kind of characteristic and apply it to the idea of a strategy. So I want to take kind of a half step here and talk a little bit about what a strategy indicator is, right? So we're going to come back up here. We've got a study, right? And the study is going to show us what we can do with that starter where it's going to point out those characteristics. But then we've got these strategies. And the difference between a study and a strategy is that a strategy here on the thinkorswim charting tool applies an order process, right? So if we come down here and let's say we've got something like a moving average strategy or a moving average crossover type of strategy, right? So we're going to take a moving average strategy, and anytime that we've got a pre-built strategy, we can click on that question mark and we can see what the characteristics are of that particular strategy. So in this case, this particular strategy is a moving average strategy adding a buy and sell order upon a crossover of price with its moving average. So we're going to use a simple moving average by default, and we're just going to simply look for price crossing above or below a particular moving average. And in this case, we're looking for price crossing above a moving average to be a buy signal, price crossing below the moving average to be a sell signal. So if we apply this strategy, okay, now if we click on the gear icon to customize this strategy, now what we can do is we can specify some information, right? So we want to see price close above, let's say, a 10-period moving average for a long entry, right? And we might say if we want to go short, or we wanted to use this as a closing order, right? To close this out, we might say price crossing below, say, for instance, a 15-period moving average. So a little bit shorter to get out, or excuse me, a little bit longer to get out, a little bit shorter to get into the trade. Whatever characteristics you wanted to see, right? So we're going to click on OK, we're going to click on Apply, and we're going to click on OK. And you notice that because we've got relatively fast moving averages here in this particular indicator, it's going to add a lot of signals in this particular case, right? So let's scroll in to see where we see those indicators, right? So an entry comes on a close of price above a particular moving average, in this case, the 15-period or the 10-period moving average. It's plotting that 15-period moving average. And so what we're not seeing here, we're seeing the closes, those moving average strategy closing orders, which is the close below that 15-period, but we're not seeing the 10-period moving average being plotted on the chart so that we can see where those openings are, right? Where those open orders are. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up here and we're going to say, all right, fine. Well, I know that this is plotting a particular moving average. It's plotting that 15-period moving, or the 15-period moving average. So we're going to make this a 10-period moving average for our moving average long entry. And I see why, because this particular script doesn't let me choose two different time frames. It only lets me choose one time frame for that characteristic. So we could add this same strategy, and we could look at this as a this moving average strategy for a closing order, or we could build the script out to show those closing orders. But in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show this particular study. I'm going to take that hammer candle study off of there. But by default, also, when we put a strategy on there, is we're going to get a floating profit and loss indicator. That floating profit and loss can be used on other studies and other instruments, but this is now specific. This floating profit and loss is specific to the trades that are being added by this study. That becomes important when we talk about back testing. And again, I want to make sure that we've got that clear understanding that just because we're back testing something doesn't mean that forward testing, looking forward into the future, that it's going to return the same results. Okay, so we click on apply and we click on OK, and we see where those orders are, right? This is moving above and below the 10-period moving average. Entering when price moves above, exiting when price moves below, closing the order out when price moves below. And so what we've used this as is kind of that particular indication of this particular type of study or strategy if we were to use this as an entry and exit. The back testing comes in if we simply right click on one of those strategy points and we click on show report. And this is where we can kind of derive some hopefully useful information. But we click on show report, and now over the period of time shown on the chart, which can also be a custom time period if we wanted it to be. But now what we're doing is we're just assuming a default amount at the current trading price at which that order was entered. And we're just assuming buying to open, selling to close, buying to open, selling to close, right? And what that overall profit and loss might be. So maximum trade profit and loss, the biggest winner was 634. The total profit and loss, we actually ended up losing a little bit in this particular case. So we could export that to an Excel file or to a CSV file to use and manipulate into, say, for instance, a trading journal. Again, remember, this information is simply hypothetical. It's based on the characteristics of this particular strategy. If we wanted to change the strategy, let's go back up to that flask icon and let's say, hey, let's make this a little bit longer term, 30 periods, crossing above and below that 30 period time frame. Click on OK, click on apply, and click on OK. Now you see that we have much fewer indicators here of entries and exits. So if we right click and we show the report, now we open that report up a little bit. Let's make that dialog box just a little bit bigger so that we can see it. We had fewer trades. Our maximum trade was larger. Total P&L was smaller, or smaller loss, and we have fewer trades. So from that characteristic, we can start to iterate. Now, the question is, ultimately, how do we turn the study into a strategy? And then how would we use this in, say, for instance, a scan, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to that flask icon one more time. And I want to show you where the characteristic is that makes this a strategy. So this goes back to the idea of Ocean Life saying, is there a way to automate trades? Now, unfortunately, the best that we can do right now is automate this in terms of back testing, not forward testing and automatically placing orders. Now, however, I'll show you something that we can do with this in terms of utilizing this strategy and creating that order, right? So what we can do is we can go to the gear or the little script icon, and if we scroll down, here's the code snippet. Here is the code snippet that gives us that characteristic, right? If we define what a buy and a sell is, in our script, which this does, what constitutes buy order? What constitutes a sell order? In order to make this a strategy, we create this add order functionality right here. And that code snippet we can take and we can copy and paste into another study code to turn that into a strategy. What we might have to do is a little debugging to make sure that our definitions are what we want them to be. But that's what creates that. And we can actually, in fact, add that. If we go to a study, we can add that as a function. If we click on others over here in terms of functions, we can click on add order as a function line, and we can start to build that script out, right? And it gives us the syntax for building that add order information into the script, right? Okay. Look, I know we're getting deep into the discussion here, but the last thing I want to do really quickly is I want to show how we can take that study and make it into a scan. So I'm going to take a scan. We're just going to open up a scan here. And again, this is one of those characteristics that will not work in paperMoney, but will work in a live trading account. So you've got to be in that live trading account to make this work. I'm going to add a filter, and I'm going to add a study filter. If you were to do this in a paperMoney account, it's going to come out and it's going to say, you know what? This doesn't work. This account not authorized for studies in scans. If you do it in a live trading account, this is what you're going to see. And by default, it's going to say, all right, ADX crossover, just alphabetically, that's the only one, right? So we're going to come down here to custom, and we're going to use one that we've created, or we're going to create one. And remember, we created that hammer candle study and the bull flag study. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this. I'm going to click on edit, and I'm going to change that study, and I'm just going to search for the particular study that I want to show. So we could do flag, and there's our bull bear flag scan or our bull bear flag study, or we could do hammer. There's our hammer study, and we can add that hammer study, and we can say, all right, if that hammer study is true within 5 bars, we can click on save, click on OK, and now we've got this as a study filter. So we can say if the hammer study is true within 5 bars, if we have a hammer within the last 5 bars, now we're going to get a result. So if we click on scan, we can run this scan and we'll see if we get any results here. So now we're getting a bunch of results. I'm going to pick one in this list. I didn't do any filtering in terms of where we were searching, so I'm just going to pick one that probably has a little bit of volume here. Let's take, because a lot of these are penny stocks, so I'm going to take one of these that has some volume. Let's take ALCE. We'll go over to our chart. We'll go ALCE. And I'm going to delete that moving average strategy that we had on there. We're going to put back on here our study, our hammer study. We're going to click on apply and OK. And there it is right there within 5 bars. There's our hammer study. Now, if we get that filter or that scan to work, then in terms of placing an order, we can say, all right, fine, I want to trade, and if I want to buy this, and again, this is not a recommendation, simply an illustrative example, I can make this order to buy contingent. I click on the little gear icon and make this order to buy contingent on a study. And I can do the same thing that I just did. I can edit this study to say, fine, make this study the hammer study is true within 3 bars. So if I've had a hammer candle that's true within 3 bars or 5 bars or whatever I want it to be, and click on OK, this order won't fill unless that study occurs. So we could put in a good till canceled order and this type of study qualifier or conditional that would let that order take place if in fact the study condition occurred. So Ocean Life, that's a way that you could automate that trade. It's kind of a backdoor way around it, but it works to make sure that again, you got to pay attention to this, not set it and forget it. So don't think that we can automate and just simply say, fine, I'm just going to let that go. You have to be on top of this. But it maybe is a way to automate that. So if you see the characteristics existing, then you can go about accomplishing that task. Guys, if you want to learn more about this, a great way to do that is to pop over here to the Trader Talks webcasts channel and come back over here and go ThinkScript and type in ThinkScript, and you will see all of the webcasts that have ThinkScript discussions in here and ways that you can go about creating those tools. Here's one that I did that was back on February 9th. Strategies and backtesting. It's a deeper dive into study to strategy and taking that process. Guys, thanks very much for joining me. My thanks to Brent Morris for helping out in this discussion, and to our great production staff for helping me to get up and running today. And hopefully soon, Ocean Life. But Tell you what, that's coming. I know there's demand for it. So, guys, thanks very much for joining me. Make sure you click on subscribe and like if you haven't already, and follow Brent and myself on X at Ben Watson CS, at Brent Morris CS. Have a great day, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here next week. Take care. Bye-bye.